Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
I'm Nick Bradvica. I'm a freshman from USC, University of Southern California. I grew up in Claremont, California, and I now live in Carlsbad. I'm studying poli-sci and creative writing, and I hope to make a living in fiction writing one day. Probably equality. I'm really big on personal rights and equality. I think if everyone's equal, not only are people happier, but I also believe that an equal society has protections against discrimination, not only financially, but also sexually, anything. So I'm a big believer in equality. I mean, my dad's always stressed it, and now that we're studying in school different philosophers and different political thinkers, we can get a better grasp on it. But I think it stems to traditional values, family values, what we're taught by our parents, somewhat in school. But I think a lot of it stems to parents.
What did your father tell you? What kind of stuff?
We're all created equally. I believe in God. I believe we're all created equally. I think we all are looked equally under His eyes. I believe that everyone deserves respect, and I think we should treat others as we would like to be treated. I follow that, I think, most fruitfully.
Well, that kind of leads into empathy. What does empathy mean to you?
Empathy is looking at others and knowing you could be them. I think I'm grateful for what I have and for what I've been given, and I feel if I were in another position, or if I feel I were myself in another position, I would just want to be treated with respect. I'd want to be treated with. I don't want to be looked down upon, of course. I feel like we're all even. We all contribute to society, and I think everyone has similar love for country, and I think it's important that we all acknowledge that and treat each other with that respect. I mean, I don't want to say I'm empathetic. I want to say I treat everyone the way they want to be treated, and I treat everyone right. And I think that falls under empathy. But I think treating people how they want to be treated isn't necessarily empathetic. I think it's treating people right and correctly. And we do as humans possess the ability to be empathetic or sympathetic, or we have pity is the famous way of putting it. I think Aristotle put it, we have pity as humans. But I think that's just acknowledging that everyone has feelings, and we all get happy, we all get sad, we all get lonely, and it's just putting yourself in someone else's shoes and walking not a mile but the entire course.
What is empathy like? If it's like an animal, like a piece of land or type of land, just anything. What is empathy?
Empathy is seeing your face in every face and putting a face on every human. I studied abroad in Germany for 6 months, and so, for example, we're at the Republican convention right here. But I think it's important to remember that not everyone's Republican. I lived in Germany. I lived with a very progressive family, and I understand other people's views, and I think that's a big part of being empathetic. I think we have to acknowledge that there's a second argument always. There's never just one argument. I think, from my experiences, I've come to acknowledge that there is a face on every human being, and that when you make a decision, you make a decision to affect that person. And I think all decisions are with consequences, and hopefully we all try to make decisions that not only affect us well, but affect everyone well.
Do you recall learning some kind of a lesson about empathy through your life, something that happened, kind of an experience of empathy?
Not a single experience. My father and mother would always say, be grateful for what you have. People don't have the same things we do. Especially living in America, we take a lot of things for granted, a lot of intangible things for granted. Freedom, liberty, and I think there's other countries where people want that, but that's not necessarily the only thing they think about. I think we're grateful to have everything. And I mean, in that way, he did teach empathy in the means that not everyone is graced with food every night, with a chance to go out and vote for who we think is correct, not just for whom will be most beneficial for us individually. So I think that an empathy is the greatest lesson as a whole. But I don't think I could pinpoint one day where I said, "Wow, I'm not the only human." So.
Well, Obama's talked about empathy just repeatedly, and I've gone through his speeches. He's mentioned about in at least 50 or 60 of his speeches. And what does that say to you about Obama when he talks about empathy?
I believe Obama's a nice, genuine guy. I think he's intelligent, and I think he probably does live empathetically, just like we all do. And I say that in the sense earlier, we all treat others like we should be treated. When it comes to speech writing, he doesn't write his own speeches, and that's perfectly fair. But I just want to make the note that he doesn't write his own speeches, so that isn't necessarily his word. Although I don't also want to write that off as his not saying that. Does that make sense?
He mentioned it in '60. Even before he became running as the candidate, he was kind of mentioning it. So.
So how do I think? What do I think?
Yeah, I talked to somebody else, and they were kind of skeptical about him being empathic and so forth. So I just.
No, I think he definitely is. I think you stand where you sit. You cast your vote where you sit in life. And so I have family members that are Democrats, family members Republicans. We don't always agree. And it's easy to cast off someone in the other party as being ignorant. It's easy to cast them off as being unintelligent. But I think in the most case, Americans are very intelligent. I think everyone is empathetic. I think some people have different views, and like you're saying, that's what you wouldn't be doing this interview without it. I think Obama's a nice guy. I think he wants what's best. I would sometimes disagree with how to get there, but I do think he has empathy. We're all capable of it.
So what would you do to kind of deepen empathy within the country? You mentioned that everybody has kind of that capacity for empathy, and there's a lot of empathy already within society. How could we actually deepen that empathy? I use the word a culture of empathy, so that the institutions support kind of more of an empathic understanding and connection between people.
I hate to stress it because I hate to say that people aren't showing empathy. I don't want to say that because I don't want to generalize. I think I'm a big believer in voting not for what is best for you necessarily, but for what you think is best for the general populace. So the general will would come into play here, and I think I'm a big believer in democracy. In terms of individuals where we could say you might need to be more empathetic, it just comes down to parenting. There's a lot of parents who don't say other people are worse off. And I think it's always important to acknowledge that living in America especially, we are graced with so much. And we go to the supermarket and we buy food, and we purchase that food with a lot of money, and we go home and we eat it. And I think people need to realize that there's a bigger world out there. And I'm not saying that people are wrong and they need to change, but I do think it's important to acknowledge there's a bigger world out there.
So is there anything else you'd like to say about empathy that you feel should be covered?
I don't know, you asked some good questions. I can't stress enough, just treat others how you want to be treated. The best example I can give is nonviolence. Never hit anybody in my life. And it's just a simple thing. I've been hit before, and I know it's not fun being hit. And so if people can take an individual act and say, I will improve on that, I will not be violent, or I will donate this, or I will give up this, I think it's important that we do try always to make an effort to give others what we have. Because I do believe, I'm Christian, and I believe that what we do for each other, we do for ourselves.